The following radio show is live, except for the announcement you're hearing right now.
Welcome back to Your Island Live with your host, Tom Schilero, on 103.9 LI News Radio.
And once again, welcome back as we're moving along on our midweek edition, talking about so many things going on, from Albany to Hauppauge to Riverhead to D.C., to Kiev and to Warsaw. We covered right here on LA News Radio. We got the greatest contributors. Let me tell you something, folks. Wednesday edition, 12:35, we have Ken Bombace. Ken is the CEO of Global Threat Solutions. They do security consulting. They do protection services, intel. They have offices in NYLA, former Army intelligence captain. He led counterinsurgency operations in Samarra, Iraq, retired criminal intelligence detective, professor of criminal justice over there in Farmingdale. And he served in Germany during the fall of the Berlin Wall and served at Ground Zero. And where can you find him? Right here on LI News Radio. He's on Jay's show quite a bit, LI in the AM, and you'll hear him every Wednesday on this show right here, on midday show here on Your Island with Tom Schilero. Once again, Ken Bombace, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me on today.
Pleasure. I mean, first of all, I got so much to ask you about. We woke up Monday morning, I think it was. We found out that early Sunday morning, the President of the United States gets on Air Force One. He goes schlepping across the Atlantic. I think they landed in Warsaw, and then they got on a train. They're calling it, I forget, Train Force One or something. I don't know what they're calling it, something. And he took a 10-hour train trip into a war zone. The President of the United States. I mean, pretty heavy stuff. What about the intel? How do you protect the President when you put him on a train? See, I'm more comfortable with being in a plane than on a train. On the train, you're on the ground. You can get mercenary forces or terrorists that could get intel that the top guy from the U.S. is on this train that's going to be coming through here in the next 15 minutes. You would worry about any sort of terrorist action or any action taken by any of the warring partners in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. I mean, and it didn't seem like they had a whole lot of time to prepare for this thing. You know, Ken, how would you look at it from an intel guy, Army intelligence captain, former Army intelligence captain? How would you look at that? Is that just like an intel nightmare, a security nightmare, or is there a way to at least make it happen? And obviously it did happen.
Right. So I thought a lot about this as a security professional, someone who worked very closely in many operations with the Secret Service, and also former Army intelligence officer who served in a combat zone. I was thinking about the security of this trip, and there's a few things I'd note. First, this has been planned for months. They did a pretty good job at keeping it quiet. They didn't publicly announce it until after he was already there. That's one thing. The other thing is they did, however, hours before President Biden departed, they notified Moscow and said, look, President's coming. They actually told them because they don't want any accidental incidents. Think about it. They've targeted rail lines over there and infrastructure. These are some things that they just want to make sure there's no accidental issues concerning the president. So they notified Moscow. Now, there's some unique security challenges for this trip that I think your average person might not pick up on. Now, because our presidents, they've traveled to war zones many times throughout the years. And the big difference, though, is they're usually landing in a war zone that's occupied and controlled by U.S. military forces. In this case, that's not the case. And they had to rely on local security and coordination being provided by the Ukrainian security forces. And that's a big leap for the Secret Service. So what I would say is that they had a lot of additional resources and contingencies put into place for this specific trip, including, I think they must have supplemented Secret Service personnel with Tier 1 U.S. military special operations personnel. That'd be my guess. Because it's a unique challenge when you're relying on Ukraine. And they've done a valiant job in this conflict, but they're not the U.S. military, and we rely on our own troops for these types of trips usually. So it was a challenge for sure. But it's from a security view, I think that they've pulled it off. It was a successful mission to get him there, and now obviously he's in Poland with other Eastern European leaders.
And I may think, because I saw him going up on a plane, I think he may be on his way back home to the United States. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty dramatic stuff. When I went on the air on Monday, that's exactly how we led the story and talking about it. I know you were talking on Jay Oliver about it also. Here's one thing that gets to me. I remember a number of times when in law enforcement that whenever the president appeared with local officers, they were told they had to be disarmed. I guess for some reason that they couldn't check every cop. And I always thought that was strange. I said, you're really going to take guns away from the police because the president's there? And I guess that was some sort of a promulgation by the Secret Service that we need to control firearms near the president. He's our protectee. We've got to make sure we cannot vet every police officer that's there. Because I remember seeing Reagan with a whole slew of cops honoring them and so on. And they all had their holsters, their duty holsters, empty. And so that must have been an order. But here's what got to me about this that occurred on Monday, is there were a couple of Ukrainian soldiers there walking alongside, off to the side, Zelensky and Biden. They were holding their rifles. And I thought that was something that could have been a possible security risk. How would you know who those, and you mentioned it just now when you said it, we didn't know who those Ukrainian soldiers were. When you think about it, could they have been infiltrated by some Russian mercenaries or something like that? Am I thinking too movie-esque here, or is that something that would have been a concern to you?
Not necessarily that you're thinking too movie-esque, but what I would say is we don't know who those Ukrainian soldiers were walking along them, but I guarantee the Secret Service knew a lot about them. And, you have to remember, we're landing in a sovereign country. We can't tell that leader, hey, by the way, you get rid of your security. Our guy's more important. So he's allowed to have his detail there, too. He's in a war zone. He's a president that's probably the most sought-after president in the world right now because Russia would love to target him. But I think that the personnel that was immediately surrounding a highly vetted personnel on both sides, obviously the Secret Service and military, but obviously on the Ukrainian side too. Our Secret Service knew exactly who was going to be walking if they were going to be armed alongside our president. But yeah, and you have to remember, security is a mitigation business. Nothing's 100%. So, what you do is take steps to mitigate. So in America, you mentioned the police. I've worked on numerous presidential operations with the Secret Service, and I've been in very close proximity to current president, current vice president, and former president. But, when you have 50,000 police agencies or more in the United States and all these personnel, all with varying requirements to be vetted and brought onto those departments, it would be a monumental task for the Secret Service to try and vet everybody. But they do have policies like when you were saying, I remember in particular a detail where the President Obama had landed, and they had some requirements for that one as he was approaching and stuff with the police personnel that were there. So, I think what happens is you don't take offense and people defer to the Secret Service. This is what they do, and that's their sole or primary mission, is to protect, especially when it's POTUS. So law enforcement professionals, I don't think they take offense to it, and we understand that's their mission.
I can relate a story. Donald Trump came to Gabreski Airport. He was going to a fundraiser in West Hampton among some major corporate guy and raising some money for the president's reelection campaign. And I remember getting a call, and we actually publicized this in the trade newspapers in the trade journals for the LA News Radio is associated with. And right after one of my shows, I get a call, and on my cell phone it said White House. And I couldn't believe it. It said White House. I answered the phone, and it was somebody that my name was given to the White House to drive in the motorcade. And because they have certain dignitaries that they have to take in the motorcade, and the Secret Service handles, I think, X amount of people, and then they utilize other drivers. So my name was forwarded, and I believe it was forwarded through Lee Zeldin's office at the time. So I said, yeah, I'll absolutely do it. And what they were doing was looking for retired police officers to drive in the presidential motorcade. Well, it was a fascinating experience, and something that at the time I didn't know you. I would have asked you a lot of questions about it because they took as much precautions with Donald Trump going to Gabreski Airport, which is kind of a controlled environment, and then driving through the streets. I remember driving through Sunrise Highway, and all the traffic gets blocked off. It's amazing, folks, to drive in a presidential motorcade. And I was driving some people that they were honoring, and at one point I had Lee Zeldin in my vehicle, also the local congressman. And we were specifically told when we got there. First of all, we had to give all of our information ahead of time, and it was myself and a number of other Suffolk police officers that were called, mostly retired folks. There was a couple of chiefs there, and, higher ups. I was very lucky to get the call to do this. In fact, we even broadcasted right on the motorcade through the telephone. So in the meantime, we were specifically told, do not bring your off-duty weapons at all. Do not do that. And then I found out later on that they utilized ESU, Suffolk County's ESU. I'm sure you're very familiar with them. And they were certainly armed because they were at all the different locations along the route, and they were certainly locations at the destination and so on. Is there a time, and I'm getting to the question, to me it was a fascinating experience to be able to do it, got to meet Donald Trump and all of that. To me, will they utilize, from your knowledge, local law enforcement after a certain vetting process? Because I'll tell you, the ESU guys were definitely armed. I can tell you that right now.
Oh, yeah. So I've been armed in every one of these details, and I've been in close proximity. Of course, they use them. I'll tell you, they have what they call a counterpart program. And the Secret Service simply doesn't have the resources and the numbers to provide all the security that's needed. Like you just mentioned, Tom, I've been a part of these motorcades and planned these motorcades with the Secret Service so many times. They require, you look at a department like Suffolk County, which is a large department, one of the largest in the country. Secret Service doesn't have the marine resources, the boats that have to go by those waterways that the president's going to pass and shut down boat traffic. They don't have aviation flying over with helicopters, checking those roadways. It's a whole mission that we do to make sure there's no threats along the roadways. The motorcycles that are part of those motorcades, the tactical support, like you're mentioning with ESU, and the intel, which part of our mission was protective operations. That's usually the way it is in departments who have that unit like NYPD does the same thing. Their intel guys do close protection services for dignitaries. So, yeah, it's not only do they allow them, they rely on it. They simply don't have the staffing or the resources to provide all of those services during a visit. So it's a big part of the Secret Service model. And they love departments that work closely with them. Not all are the same, and give them all the resources they need, because those resources cost money. And if you have a department that's going to work closely and support, and when they ask for these resources, you provide them, they love that. And it's a close working relationship, work with them for years. And they couldn't do the job without local police.
Yeah, and I found meeting that day was extraordinary for me, because I just learned so much on how they do this. Of course, it reminded me this with Biden landing over there in Kiev. I would say, how could you possibly do for Joe Biden what you did for Donald Trump on Long Island over there at West Hampton? You really couldn't, because there you're in the incident with Donald Trump and that motorcade, it's all in America. There you're in a possible hostile zone. So it's a tremendous undertaking. Certainly what you do for a living with CEO of Global Threat Solutions in terms of protection services, it's pretty fascinating stuff, folks. And I'm bringing it up because I think it's interesting to the audience to see exactly, what takes place. And the vehicle that I was driving was right behind the Beast. I got some pictures taken at the Beast, and it's very. I was looking in the Beast, and they said I could look, but they said I can't take any pictures of what was in the Beast, and they told me what's in the Beast is top secret. So I'm not going to say it on the air what I saw, but I was right behind it, and I think right after the president got off of the Air Force plane, Air Force One, which they used the smaller version, they didn't use the big 747 one to come into Gabreski. One of the Secret Service agents got out of the car, and he walked over to the car that I was driving. At the time, Lee Zeldin was there, Congressman Zeldin, and rolled down the window. And the Secret Service agent said to the congressman, to Lee, said, "The president wants you to ride with him." So Lee's getting out of the car, and I said, "Lee, is that really nice to do to me? Is to get out of my car to go ride with the president?" And it really brought home the enormity of this, and yet we're still all the same. It's kind of interesting to see it, but the amount of security, even for that event, was pretty incredible. Shutting off Sunrise Highway in the middle of the day in the summertime is definitely a hardship on a lot of Long Islanders, Ken.
Yeah, so, and getting back to Ukraine and that operation, which is a very unique challenge over there, a lot of people would also probably think, why would you possibly notify Russia? But it goes to show you, with all the rhetoric and all the threats and the heightened level of talk going back and forth between Russia and the U.S., even they don't want that mistake. Even Putin doesn't want that mistake where by accident they have an operation, because it's obviously a hot war. Eastern Europe is really hot right now. A mistake of targeting the president while he's there, even unknowingly, it would heighten things and escalate things probably to a level that Russia would never want to see. So, you see that behind it, even with everything that's going on, there's still some common sense coordination that has to go on to avoid catastrophic problems. And you saw that happen here. And I also thought that was pretty interesting. And it doesn't stop in Ukraine. His security now in Eastern Europe is obviously very heightened too. And the Secret Service additional resources when they do these operations that they bring to bear to make sure that the president's safe when they travel in other countries.
Not that I want to bring in Hollywood in this discussion, but I don't know if you've ever seen the movie London Has Fallen. And I just happened to see it a couple of days before I read this. And, again, I know it's Hollywood. I know it's a script. But that was exactly what the script was. The president of the United States was going to London to a funeral of the Prime Minister of England. And there was a terrorist attack. And they utilized people in uniform. They, meaning the bad guys, the terrorists, had police officers dressed up as police officers who actually turned on the security details. So you wonder whether that's Hollywood or something something of that enormity could be turned around that way. So it's certainly got to be nerve-wracking when one thinks about it. Going back to more reality, let's get away from Hollywood for a second, but more reality. It seems like we are getting deeper and deeper into this in terms of our support for the Ukraine, as with the NATO countries and so on. It almost seems like you keep pulling that rope tighter and tighter. It's not going to break that easy.
Right. So we've escalated in the way that we've spent over $100 billion. And now during this trip, President Biden has pledged $500 million towards additional support for Ukraine. And, I've supported the idea of us, heavily backing Ukraine throughout this conflict. I don't necessarily have a problem with us financially supporting them and with weapon systems. What I have more of an issue with is that our NATO partners are not doing nearly the same. That's a problem, especially since, as we all know, the U.S. is facing economic challenges, huge economic challenges right now. We've spent a lot of money over there, and I don't think enough is done to hold our partners responsible for providing the same type of support that we do and that we are. So that's one thing. Also, during this trip, a lot has happened. While President Biden meets with Eastern European leaders to affirm his support for NATO and Eastern Europe, the top diplomats of China and Russia are meeting to discuss increased cooperation and potential direct military support for Russia by China. So Tom, this is clearly the new Cold War that we're facing here. And what I would say is it's far more unstable and, in my opinion, dangerous than the original Cold War, which I served in. Russia is actively engaged in a hot war in Eastern Europe. China's made direct threats concerning Taiwan. Putin and China have threatened the direct use of nuclear weapons. This is such a volatile situation right now, and I've said this before, but I just don't think it's getting nearly the attention by the American people that it needs to get. And I think that it should be a unifying call right now, with something that our country needs desperately, like we saw after 9/11. Where Democrats and Republicans all come together and say, we need to build our military. We need to be able, it's great for President Biden to speak tough in Poland about what we're going to do. And we won't give up 1 inch of Eastern Europe or NATO land. But we need to be able to actually do that. And right now our military is hurting, and we have recruitment shortages. we need to be investing. We're giving a lot of weapons to Ukraine and financial support. We need to be focusing on building our national security apparatus, specifically our military, so that when he's over there talking, people believe it. These countries, Tom, they believe one thing, and that's strength. That's the only thing they believe in. And we need to show that strength. Otherwise, those words are meaningless.
Yeah. Well said. Once again, Ken Bombace here every Wednesday, 12:35. Ken, you have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week, my friend.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. Talk soon.